Welcome to BIV Today, the daily business show from the Business in Vancouver newsroom. I'm Hayley Woodin, executive editor at BIV. Here's a good question. How can employers attract and retain younger generations of workers, specifically Millennial and Gen Z or Gen Z employees? The answer, according to a new Canadian Payroll Association essential benefits survey, is simply accurate and timely pay. Who would have thought? I'm joined today by Manjit Minhas, CEO and co-founder of Minhas Breweries, distilleries, and wineries, and of course, known to many households and employers and people throughout the country as a dragon on the popular CBC Dragon's Den television show. She's also a spokesperson for this report and a member of CPA. Great to have you on the program. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So I don't know if this should be shocking or if it's simple or if there's more to it, but I mean, have you found this to be true, that it really is just having simple, straightforward, accurate, and timely payroll that is the key to attracting younger generations of workers?
Well, yeah, interestingly enough, as an employer, I definitely am always looking to attract and retain employees, especially that younger generation, because it is definitely critical for the health and success of any business and organization. And so when I too heard the results of the survey, which was awesome that it was Canadian specific, because I think far too many times do we get research in this country that is not Canadian specific. It's from the United States or over the pond. And so it was really nice to see, and it surprised me in some ways and didn't surprise me in some ways, because I too have been through this. And I think, many employers will tell you, especially when they're starting, and that was the case in our business. When we started Minhas Breweries, my brother and I, 21 years ago, and we started to have employees, not just ourselves anymore, we had a breakdown in our payroll, and we made some missteps, and it was mismanaged, unfortunately, 2 times. And it was a day late. It was supposed to be there on Wednesdays, and it wasn't. And I heard about it loud and clear from my employees at that time that this was not okay, that we were breaking the trust between employee and employer. And I think that is really the key here, that without paying attention to payroll, which is not how much an employee gets paid, but how they get paid is really important. And it can break down trust between in that very crucial relationship if it is not managed properly.
Do you get the sense that this is largely an issue that affects first companies that are going through a turbulent time, perhaps, but entrepreneurs who are just getting a company up and running? Because I have to think the larger, more established an organization, typically you would expect that they kind of have their payroll systems down pat.
Yeah, they do. But just like anything, it's not usually top of mind all the time. And I think that a lot of workplaces, especially, to be honest, the large workplaces and, maybe a lot of the tech focused ones that are looking in order to attract that younger generation, those Gen Z and millennials, pay attention to the work perks, free lunches and gym memberships and, free snacks. And a lot of the larger ones pay attention to health and dental benefits and retirement plans. And so both are not often paying attention to professionally manage their payroll, but also that timely and accurate, and most importantly, consistent payroll. Because you know what, in the last year during the pandemic, many organizations, no matter what size you are, have had to deal with a lot of changing government regulations and rules. And, payroll professionals themselves have really had to scramble to understand what is going on, what makes them compliant and current, which the Canadian Payroll Association has been there to help.
You mentioned a few moments ago the importance of trust, and that's really at the core of this issue. And do you have a sense whether COVID-19 has eroded that trust, or are workers pretty forgiving if their employer, for example, had a difficult time meeting payroll or had to change things perhaps significantly on relatively short notice?
Yeah, definitely can't ignore that COVID-19 has changed how we work, including that many of us have been working remotely also, but also have changed the relationship that we have with our employer. And so it did find that they are forgiving, but not too many times. So after, definitely, if there's missteps and mistakes, once or twice or more, if it happens more than that, there definitely is is not peace of mind. You do not have a happy and engaged employee, and they can start looking elsewhere for some place that they can get that consistent and timely payroll. Because you know what, everybody, especially during this pandemic, has paid more attention to their finances. And if they're expecting to get paid on a Wednesday, on Thursday, many have mortgage payments and car payments and other financial commitments that also during this time are sometimes being strained. And so 79% of respondents to the survey said that it is more important now than it was pre-pandemic to them, this issue.
That certainly makes sense, just given the amount of financial disruption and unpredictability we've had to go through over the past year. If we move beyond that critical payroll piece, do employees or potential employees care about some of those other perks you mentioned? Do they still care about flexibility? Would be a big one that was key over the last year, but some of the other fun things?
They do. We didn't specifically touch on those. We rated them against each other. And so, yes, they definitely, mental health awareness, communication, empathy are all definitely very important to employees. But those extra work perks really are not on the top of the list or on anybody's radar right now. And when we bounce back, because we will, and we go back into the offices and whatever that might look like, there's some of those perks and their value might come back, but still consistent and timely payroll will be at the top of that across all age groups. And I think it's important to understand that even when employers, if they've had to lay off people during this time, that when they do have to staff up again, when things do bounce back, that this is a really important factor that they should be focusing on with their benefits plan.
Any advice based on your own personal experience for how employers should deal with if they have to bring about a change in payroll? Maybe they made a misstep and they want to be forgiven, they want to do what's right. Any advice you can share with them about how to handle some of those more difficult situations?
Yeah, I think just like any difficult situation, it's really important to communicate, to say that we made a mistake, to own up to it, and really to show that you're doing everything that you can to ensure that it doesn't happen again. Not to say that it won't, because things happen, and these days we definitely rely on technology a lot, and things can happen. But it is important to communicate, and just as we as employers should have empathy with our employees, it should be vice versa. Also, but I think that that communication piece is really important, that as soon as an employer notices that something has gone wrong, that they own up to it and they do everything they can to fix it. And sometimes that includes having some tough conversations.
This is clearly something that's very important to employees, yet I don't think I've ever come across a job application that highlights, look, we will pay you consistently and on time and the exact amount you're expecting. So with that in mind, because that might be a bit awkward, how can an employer really leverage the findings of this survey to help them attract the kind of talent that they're looking for?
I think just exactly what you said, to say that it is a priority to them, because it isn't always a part of the conversation, that when we're talking about benefits and when we're going through that hiring process, or more importantly, when a company is going through turbulent times and having challenges, as we all are now, because it is something that employees are thinking about. So why not talk about it? Why not also ask the questions? I think as too many employers assume what is important to their employees, but they don't actually know because they aren't asking the questions. So I think another thing that the survey really does highlight is that it's important to ask, because you might be surprised by how simple the answers might be.
That's a very good point. Good for the employees probably to ask as well if that's something that really matters to them. They can certainly bring it up in a job interview if the employer hasn't brought it up as an asset or benefit to working with them.
Right, exactly.
Any final thoughts, Manjit, on how employers across the country or in British Columbia can really leverage the insights from this report to help them attract younger generations of workers that maybe they've had a bit of a difficult time doing so?
Yeah, I think just like anything, it's about, asking, communicating, having some empathy for that generation to understand what they are going through. The financial literacy part of things is really important. And during this time that the younger generation is paying attention to what are their financial commitments, how much is coming in and when and how and what is going out. So having those tools for them in order to really navigate that part of their life. Also, payroll.ca is the website for the Canadian Payroll Association. A lot of great tips and tools there for professionals and companies of all sizes to stay current, to stay compliant, and stay connected with best practices, with up-to-date regulation and education, but also to understand that this is an important topic that we should prioritize.
Strikes me too, we often focus on the differences across generations. This is something I think everyone can relate to. Everybody wants to be paid on time and accurately.
Well, yeah, really interesting. Yes, agreed. Across all age groups, a lot of the findings were very similar. And I think that was surprising to a lot of people. I think that wrongfully, many employers think that the different generations will have different priorities. But it's nice to know that we are all the same in a lot of different ways. We all got to pay our bills and we all want to do it on time. And we want to have that peace of mind to know that it will be in our court to do so.
Well said, Manjit. Thank you so much for taking the time to join our show and share some insight on this latest survey. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
My guest today was Manjit Minhas, CEO and co-founder of Minhas Breweries, Distilleries, and Wineries, and a dragon on CBC's Dragon's Den. She's also a spokesperson for a new report out from the Canadian Payroll Association. You can find more information on that survey on their website. I'm Hayley Woodin, executive editor at Business in Vancouver. Thanks so much for joining us. This has been BIV Today. And if you liked what you heard or watched on our show today, you can subscribe. You can find the button to subscribe at biv.com/audio. You can also find our show on whichever podcast app you choose to listen to. We publish new episodes every single day, so you can find a new episode of our show tomorrow.